This is the new Lush, and ZIIGAAT might have just made a better version of the Explorer. Basically, the Lush is a cleaner, more airy and technical full Explorer with more open vocals. The overall sound is balanced, well-rounded, full, smooth, with a slight airiness to the sound. The vocal presentation is more laid back and relaxed in the mix. It has a slightly thicker note weight to the male vocals, and the overall presentation is smooth and quote-unquote lush like the name suggests. Now personally, I recommend the Lush for higher volume listening like the Explorer because it's a bit too laid back and borderline anemic at mid to lower volumes. I think it really comes to life if you give it more scaling. At mid to lower volumes, it still sounds fine. It's a very smooth, fatigue free listen, but you're not gonna get the same engagement as you will if you crank it up. Tip wise, I'm using the soft ear ultra clears for the best balance in the treble. If you want more air, try something that has like a wider bore opening like the TANCHJIM, the Venus wide bores, or if you want something smoother, you have the TANCHJIM Senkais, and you also have the spin fits. Really, any tips work on these, just as long as they fit comfortably. I think it'll be fine. In terms of the use case, I find myself using these in two scenarios. Number one, at mid to lower volumes, I like these while I'm working, doing something. I'm doing laundry, I'm doing chores, and I just have these on as like a background kind of set. They are very smooth, non-fatiguing, non-intrusive, and it doesn't distract you from what you're doing. The other scenario is when I'm just listening to music. I want to be immersed in the sound. You crank these up, the potential is unveiled. The vocals start popping out more. You get more extension in the singers. There's more impact and thump from the low end. Overall, you just hear things more clearly, like in the separation as well, if you give it more scaling. Now, even though the Lush is a slight step up over the Explorer in terms of technical performance, I wouldn't say it's a technical and value monster or anything like that. Like under 200 bucks, you still have the Super Mix 4, the Nova, Chopin Quintet. All of those are more resolving and detailed and the best bang for your buck in terms of performance. But the downside to those is that they don't allow you to be immersed in the music as much as higher scaling sets like the Lush, because these actually remind me of the Odysseys in a way that they both will take you on a musical journey with the scaling, but the only difference is that the Odyssey feels more dynamic and engaging. The sound pops a little bit more, while the Lush is a more smooth sailing kind of just like laid back cruiser set. Aside from being a bit too safe at mid volume, the only real nitpick I have is the bass texture. It's just okay, like it gets the job done, but it's not like super resolving, tactile like the Odysseys or the single chest or the Arcanis even. The low end, reminds me of the Explorers, but just not as warm, better controlled, and less in quantity. I think the qualities is around the same, and it has enough to be like engaging when you crank them up, but it is bass light at mid volume. Like, yeah, you can technically listen to Kendrick on these, they sound fine, but they're just not my first pick when it comes to like hip-hop sub-bass focused tracks like EDM. I think something with more sub-bass or just like more low-end in general would work better in that scenario. Genre-wise, the Lush played back every song I tested smoothly with no fatigue at mid to lower volumes. I guess you can say it's an all-rounder in the sense that it's just inoffensive. It's very smooth at that volume, but again, I wouldn't say the experience at mid volume was like super engaging or super musical. It's just very relaxing listen at that volume. The Lush does a good job of being clear enough, but not overly distracting while I'm like working or something like that. However, at higher volumes, the Lush sounds very good with rock, metal, R&B bands. It's not fatiguing in the vocals, but it still has that like nice heft to the kick drums and the male vocals. It's full, it's like smooth, it's natural, it's well balanced, but the instruments and the vocals aren't buried or like overly warm like the Explorer. They pop out a little bit more. The separation and detail is good enough at higher volumes. It doesn't like pierce your ears. These cymbals are clear, slightly airy, never fatiguing, and they're not the most splashy or sparkly like the Meta, for example, but they get the job done without killing your ears. The only other issue I ran into was that the snare sometimes felt a bit sharp and sudden on certain songs like Say It by Yorushika, like once you give it more volume, and they don't scale well with energetic genres like J-pop or K-pop, but then again, nothing really does. So aside from that, the Lush is a very lush, smooth, and immersive listen. Now, when it comes to value, I wouldn't say these are a steal at $180, especially with this cable and the packaging. They really need to step up the cable game, but at higher volumes, I do recommend them for that smooth immersion, and it's a unique enough to stand out in that sense like the Explorer. But if you just want a smooth and relaxing listen at mid volume, you can just get the EW300 DSP, you can get the TANCHJIM for you, or you can just get the Explorer, right? They're all cheaper at like around $100. So you can definitely get more like technical and better value sets at $100 and at $200. Like the Lush isn't going to like wow you detail wise, since it's more of a niche set for those who like the sound of the Explorer or even the Chinos, and you just want a little bit better separation, a little bit more stage air. So in that context, yeah, go for it. As for some other comparisons versus the LETSHUOER S08, the Lush sounds much cleaner. It's a little bit better separated and it feels more open when it comes to the staging. The S08 in comparison comes off as darker and bassier. The vocals aren't as, you know, clear. It's a little bit more forward, it's a little more huskier, and overall in terms of just like balance, the Lush does feel a little bit more balanced than the S08. And in terms of technical performance, the Lush is a slight step up when it comes to the clarity, the treble extension, the stage presence. If you own the S08, the Explorer, or the Chinos, all three of those are going to be very similar in terms of the sound, and the Lush would be a good next upgrade over those. Then versus some all-rounders like the Super Mix 4, Nova, AETHER, you know, the Chopin, those are all going to sound more correct and clear at mid-volume. They feel livelier, they feel more dynamic, it's less smooth, and in terms of detail and resolution, the Lush is a step behind them. Again, if you want the best bang for your buck tech-wise, give those a shot instead. Both groups have different use cases. One group follows a traditional, you know, all-rounder, you listen at mid-volume kind of sound, whereas the Lush is, I guess, quote-unquote more unique and different in that it's smoother and it scales very nice. Same with the vocal-centric sets like the PCP50 or the Cadenza 4. Those two are going to be slightly more resolving with more forward, a little bit more powerful vocals because they just have more gain in the 2 to 3K, and that highlights the mid-range and the vocals a little bit better. If you want female vocals, the Cadenza 4 is probably still the best around 200. It's airy, clean, sweet. Like they're both bass light, but they just work better for vocals. And if you want like a solid all-rounder vocal performer, that would be the P50. Then versus some treble boosted sets like the Meta and the ET142, the Lush is more natural in the timbre. It's not like crispy or sizzly. It's not gonna have the same like sparkliness and detail in the treble extension as those two, but they do still have their own special sauce, but they're just like total opposite of each other. For example, the Lush is a much smoother and more immersive listen, whereas the Meta is a mid to lower volume listen that's more energetic and more detailed and more sparkly in the treble. The ET142 is like the most all-rounded set out of the two. It's more dynamic, it's a little bit sharper, it's worse in the timbre for sure, but it's a lot more detailed and a lot more resolving in the playback, especially with the blue nozzle, and you also do have more like wider variety when it comes to the tuning options. However, the two closest sets would actually be the Timeless 2 with the silver small nozzles and the TANCHJIM Origin, with both of them having that smooth and balanced kind of tuning, slightly full but not warm, just like the Lush. The only major difference is that they don't scale as well as the Lush. They are more mid-volume sets. I would personally take the Lush because I listen louder. I like the immersion, you know, factor better, and it's also a little bit cheaper. But if we're talking mid-volume, those two sound a little bit more forward, correct, a little bit clearer in the presentation because it's just less laid back versus the Lush. It's slightly, I guess, quote unquote, slightly more V than Lush, even though they're not V shapes. But like the vocal and the treble is more audible, it feels a little bit more engaging, and really depends on what your use case is. Then lastly, versus its older brother, the Odyssey at higher volume is a more V-shaped version of the Lush. The imaging is sharper, the sub-bass texture feels a little bit more tactile, the impact and the slam from the drums hits a little bit harder, there's just a little bit more bite to the vocals, and the overall sound is more dynamic and engaging and less smooth. Both are very immersive, but just in different ways. It feels like the Odyssey is like the, you know, extroverted older brother, and the Lush is the younger, more reserved sibling. And continuing with that analogy, the Arcanus would then be the oldest and most matured sibling. It's balanced when it needs to be, but shows off its own identity when the right track comes on. In terms of performance and resolution, the Arcanus is a step up over the other two. The vocal, the staging feels more open, it pulls out more detail. The Arcanus does both mid and higher volumes pretty well, and most importantly, where the Lush and the Odysseys are, you know, more all-rounder sets that scales really good, the Arcanus on the other hand really knows its own like specialty, especially when it comes to the vocals. If you have the money, I would recommend getting an Arcanus for the vocals, especially if you have a similar library like mine that's more vocal centric. But if you don't, both the Lush and Odysseys are still great sets. Anyhow, I hope this review is helpful. Another solid release from ZIIGAAT that I think is going to be a hit with Explorer and S08 owners. I also got the LETSHUOER DX1 next week with a speedrun as well, so stay tuned for that. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see everyone in the next one. Shout out to Dom Q, Roark's Cat, Mystic Spoon Attack, B Urak, Discal Scaldus, Walker Standard, Patrick, User, Mr. Gorillas, Polly J, and Han Risto, Gising Yon, Christopher Jackson, Name, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, Obi, Wizard, Frickalicious, Tapis R, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Shrimpback Lay, Forever New, Choco Norris 420, FKSRG, Treble Well Extended, 777ZK, Cousin Fat, Torque Cog, Ken, Zane, Early Bird, Oh Really, Georgios, Anthony, and Julius. Thank you guys so much.